Here we go.
Here we go. So it's happy hour at home because I don't know, it's 3 p.m. on the West Coast and 6 on the East Coast. It felt like a good time for us to all do happy hour, right, Kate?
Absolutely. On a Thursday, ready to wind down with a glass of wine or two, some good appetizers. So, welcome everyone. If you don't know who we are, my name is Kate Ramos, and I write a blog called Hola Jalapeno.
And she has a cookbook coming out very soon.
And
So
yes, thank
soon
you,
to
Aida.
be cookbook author.
Yes, soon to be cookbook author. I have a cookbook coming out in November called Plant Powered Mexican, so you can pre-order it now. But all the appetizers we're going to be sharing, with the exception of one, are all plant-based. So very excited to talk about some California produce as well. And Aida, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So Kate and I have known each other forever. I know some of you have joined us for our cooking classes. You might know us from our social feeds. But the two of us know each other from having worked in a recipe test kitchen together in San Francisco. So before we ever became friends with California Grown, we were already cooking all things grown in California in the test kitchen at restaurants we've worked at. So we have big passion for this, especially seasonal produce grown across the state. I'm Aida Mollenkamp, and I grew up in Los Angeles, but I've lived all over the state, now based in Mammoth Lakes, California. And I have the company Salt and Wind Travel. We are a food first travel company, and we send travelers across California on winery visits, farm visits, all kinds of stuff. So not only I like cooking with a lot of the ingredients from the state, but also helping to tell the stories and share those experiences with other people. So Kate and I'm going to speak for both of us, Kate, and say that if our perfect party would be one that's just a bunch of small plates with a bunch of different things to try and drink.
I mean, that's my perfect meal of any time.
Of any time. On a Tuesday night, on a Sunday, it doesn't matter.
That's what I love, this concept of happy hour at home, because you can make it exactly how you want it, because you're at home and you don't, it's just what you like. And if it were me at my home, I would definitely be eating small bites and drinking wine. So that's what we're going to do today.
So this is reality, is what we're trying to tell you. We try to make this happen as much as possible. Yes. But the reason we're doing it today is that I'm sure you've seen on the California Grown Facebook page that it is also California Wine Month this month. And, you could go and celebrate in the wineries, or we can have friends over, kind of, and this is so exciting. Mm-hmm. So if you need all kinds of ideas, we're going to give you 6 different recipe ideas today, pair them with a lot of different wines from across the Golden State, and that's what we're going to go through. Just an FYI, if you're looking for even more recipe ideas, there is a free ebook with happy hour recipes over at discovercaliforniawines.com. But for today's recipes, they are going to be linked down in the Facebook event. And then also you can sign up for the Salt and Wind newsletter, and we will be sending all these out because these are new recipes, refreshed recipes that we are debuting for you all today. Yes. And I'm excited because we have wines from across the state. We have sparkling rosés, Sauvignon Blancs, Chardonnays, reds.
So many
we're going to talk about expected pairings, unexpected pairings, what to look for when you're throwing a party like this, because we think that it should be a situation where people can bring a bunch of different appetizers, bring a bunch of different wine, mix and match, have their own experience. But we do have a method to our madness. So Kate, do you want to show us your first recipe, and then we can kind of kick things off?
Yeah, so how this is going to work, just to give you a little FYI, is we will share our recipes and then talk about which wines we think go best with them. So the first recipe is the simplest one. We're going to start simple and work to a little bit more, not more complicated, but like richer,
bigger flavors.
Bigger flavors, maybe a bigger size. So like if you want something that might be a little bit more of a meal, so we'll go from lightest to a little bit
more indulgent.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so the first thing we're going to start off are these beet and pear chips that I just adore, and they're so great this time of year because they're kind of like the flavors of fall, but they're beautiful and so simple to make. They literally just take like They do take, I will say they take some time because it takes some time for them to dry out in the oven, but the recipe could not be more simple. So give yourself a little bit of time. This is not something you can make like in 5 minutes, but it literally just takes 5 minutes to put them in the oven, and then all you have to do is wait. And they're very light, they're very crisp. Literally, this is just a Bosque pear that I just cut very thinly on the mandolin, and then a red beet, although you could use whatever color beet you want. I know in farmers market, I live in Ventura, which is like central southern coast of California. And beets are starting to come back into the farmers market. They kind of go away during the summer, and now they're just starting to come back. So look for different colored ones for sure. Like the Chioggia beets, the candy stripe beets are so pretty. Such a great way to use those because they are so simple. Literally, this is just like olive oil and salt. That's all you do with the vegetable. So the vegetable really gets to shine. And the flavor
have you ever
gets
made chips like that in like an air fryer? Because I know,
I never have, or like a dehydrator. I don't have a dehydrator.
I don't have either.
So I've never tried that, but I'm sure that would work, and probably the air fryer would be a heck of a lot faster. But I know with air fryers, like it's a very small space, and so you can only do like a couple at a time. So give or take, I mean, faster time, but you could probably only do, because like when these are raw, they're like they're twice the size. Yeah. So you have to lay them flat in a single layer, and that might take some time in the air fryer. But
let's be honest, like if you wanted to, you could buy made beet chips if you wanted to. But the pear chips, I've only found one company I think that like really makes fabulous pear chips.
Yeah, these are, I love them, and I love the combo.
The combo for sure. I mean, so what are different ways to use it? Obviously, it's like begging for a cheese plate, right?
No, yeah, they're great on a cheese plate. I like to just eat them by themselves, with like a glass of Sauvignon Blanc is a perfect, just like little snack. If you want something very small, like just have a nice cold glass of Sauvignon Blanc. And these chips are great, and they're healthy too. Like I said, it's just olive oil and salt. They're not deep fried. They're super crisp. One thing I would mention when you're making them though, is to kind of be careful of how thin or thick you slice them. If you slice them too thick, like a 1/4 inch is just like a little too thick, and they don't get perfectly crisp. And if you slice them too thin, then they kind of disintegrate. So you got to play around with that for, maybe like 1 or 2 slices before you get the right thickness. And besides that, it's basically foolproof and really delicious.
Well, I know that one of the things you and I love is potato chips and bubbles. I feel like this is just a little bit more of an unexpected twist on that, because you're right. I feel like, especially the pear with the Sauvignon Blanc, they're just like made to complement each other. And maybe even a Chardonnay that has a teeny bit of oak on it, so that you get like the vanilla of like a Bosque or an Anjou with the vanilla of the oak of a Chardonnay. But I think it's really hard to go beyond just a sparkling Brut, right? Which I know is another favorite of ours. So do we want to talk about a couple? I know.
Yeah.
I think we have 3 sparklings here. We have a couple Sauvignon Blancs, and then we can move on to the next recipe. So
great.
Take it away.
Okay. Well, the sparkling.
I'll show the bottle for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the one I'm going to talk about is the Fableist Blanc De Blanc. This is a 2019. We are really loving this wine. It's a Central Coast wine, so kind of sort of in my backyard. And it's a collaborative wine between a winemaker and a vineyard grower. So someone who spends most of their time planting and managing the vineyard. And I just really love this. I think it's very buttery, but like has a nice acidic hit at the end, and really goes with any of these recipes. So I would recommend, you really cannot go wrong, as we always say, with like bubbles and food. So if you're ever not sure, like, I don't know, or if you're going to a party and you don't have any idea what they're serving, you're never going to go wrong with some kind of bubbles, a sparkling wine, as long as it's a Brut, I would say. You make sure you're not getting, a sweeter wine. But that really is just goes with just about everything.
So we actually have 3 different sparklings. I'll run through them really quickly. So just to re-show, the Fableist is 2019. This is from Paso Robles, which is just like Kate said right above her. And I think sometimes people don't think that we really have sparkling wine from that area of California. I just finished a road trip around the state and noticed that people who weren't from California are a little surprised because they're used to hearing from sparkling wines, which happen to be the next 2, from Sonoma and Napa, but not necessarily this area. So this project with Kurt and Andrew is not only special because this wine is special, but also their other wine. So Kurt has another project called Sans Liège, and Andrew has a project called Field Recordings. And you can actually go to Tin City in Paso Robles whenever you visit and go around and taste at both. But if you're able to find this, I always am searching during the holidays for a bubbly bottle that I can buy. I have to say that 3 times fast. That I can buy a case of, and to Kate's point, just be ready to go for any occasion. And I think the Fableist is an awesome option for that because it is just about $22, $24 a bottle. So you can spend under $150 for 6 bottles and be set for a few fall entertaining opportunities. So I think that's a really good value wine, just fun because it's from there. And then the other 2 really quickly, to Kate's point, all of these would go with all the recipes that we're showing today. Kate and I teach monthly cooking classes. They're a little bit more workshop involved. This month we did it on Sunday, and we did how to host a wine tasting party. Yeah. And the bubbles that we poured for that were the Patz and Hall 2015 Brut. And this is from North Coast. This is a slightly pricier. This is $55 bottle of wine, and it's just everything classic. Both the Fableist and this are 100% Chardonnay. So you're really going to go far with both of those. But our dear friend, we work with a lot, Amanda McCrossan, Somme Vivant, she always loves to say that, like, when in doubt, don't just go bubbles, but go rosé bubbles, because then the rosé bubbles can put up to some of our heavier, bigger recipes that we're going to show you in a little bit. And so one that you can't go wrong with this one. It is the Domaine Carneros by Tattinger. And this is the Cuvee de la Pompadour, which I love the story behind this. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Go look it up, but it's basically inspired by a love story. And it's $44. And the difference with this is, I just need to make sure I have the proportions right. It's 60% Pinot Noir and 40% Chardonnay. So that Pinot Noir is going to make it especially delicious, I would say, with the pear chips in this scenario.
I think those last 2 that you just show were they're a little bit pricier, but I think they're such nice, like, if you want to give a gift, gift, or if it's a really special occasion, like those are like lovely Thanksgiving wines or holiday, Christmas wines and things like so keep those in mind, maybe for the more important holidays for coming up.
Definitely.
Or New Year's. For sure.
So Kate says she wanted to make pear and beet chips, and then I was like, well, then I want to make sweet potato chips. And so I made sweet potato chips. Yeah. But I promise you, that's not where it ends. We're not just going to only talk
We're just going to make veggie chips. I hope
welcome to Happy Hour Home. All it is veggie chips. Every veggie in the world turned into a chip.
Veggies and wine. We should start a cooking show called Veggies and Wine.
Veggies and wine. Mochi waffles. Move over. We've got veggies and wine.
We got veggies and wine. What else do you want?
Excuse me, California Grown. Would you like us to make that into a show?
Would someone like to sponsor that show? California Grown.
Kate, we've talked about this a lot. That like, as restaurants and chefs have gotten more plant-based, I think that platings have gotten more creative because people have had to try and like do things a little different. So when we were talking, Kate and I always love a good dip, which is why we have 2 things that are dippable during this happy hour. But the first one is this, and I'm going to just tilt my camera down so you can actually see this and I don't knock it all over the place. This is beautiful. Actually whipped goat cheese. So you bring it to room temperature, you put it in the food processor with a little bit of cream, really beautiful olive oil, like a good buttery olive oil is the key here. Just a spoonful of honey and lots of black pepper and lots of fresh thyme. And then you beat it until, like, watch this when I run this chip through it. it is super soft and fluffy. Like it
Oh, that's
almost looks
beautiful.
like a batter or something like that. It's so soft and fluffy.
And P.S. the beet and pear chips would be amazing with that
Amazing.
also.
All of the above, any combination you want. And what I love about this is that we put a drizzle of olive oil around it with a drizzle of honey. And this idea, I think, sorry, I have all my notes of all the price points so we can remember exactly how much things are costing for you. That combination of the sweet with the tang, with the butteriness of the olive oil, with the pepper of the black pepper, that's makes this one thing that you're like, oh, it's just whipped goat cheese. And then you serve it to people and they're like, what's happening here? There's like 50,000
oh no, so good.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think I did pretty much the same thing that Kate did in order to make the chips, except I sprinkled them with smoked paprika so that you have another level of smokiness going on here.
So let me ask you just one question. When you put the spice on your chips, do you do it before or after?
I do it before with smoked paprika because I find that after it doesn't like that particular spice doesn't really bloom enough. Like it needs that fat and a little bit of the heat, but I cook these very low at like 325. And so they're not going to burn. You know, if you were making something where the spice was going on and it was baking or cooking or roasting really high heat, I would be a little concerned about it burning at that point. But in this case, I put it on before. And then I was going to say that, you know, I think a dish like this, a lot of these dishes that we're going to move into next can get a little bit intimidating because there's a lot of layers of flavor to go with. And one of the things Kate and I were talking about a lot during our cooking class on Sunday is to just find what you find to be the dominant flavor and then pair to that. And so what that means in a dish like this is there's a lot of different ways you could go. So do you want to play up the sweetness of the sweet potato? Then you could go for maybe that sparkling rosé or the sparkling brut, a dry Riesling, or we have a variety of rosés that we've been pairing. I'm going to show two, and then Kate has a couple for us. So we have, if you like that more Provençal style, lighter colored rosé, then the DAOU that comes from Paso Robles, about a $19 bottle of wine, is a really good choice. And then we also have the Grgich Hills Estate, which is just a couple dollars more. Kate, I mean, is it just me, or are these like old school stories of how the first generation of like winemakers in California, I never get tired of those history lessons.
I mean, Grgich Hills is, right, you know, they continue to produce exceptional wine. But they hold a very prominent spot in Napa, and I think really still live up to their name, honestly.
For sure. So just for those of you who don't know, just quick lesson that there's a few producers out there, you know, you've probably heard of Mondavi or the Jackson family of Kendall-Jackson, but the Grgich Hills is Mike Grgich, and he was actually one of the winemakers that when we had the tasting of Paris in the 70s in Napa, and they blind tasted American versus French wines, the wine that won was made by Mike Grgich. And so he left where he was and went to make Grgich Hills Estates. And so it's a multi-generational family winery at this point. But you know, what I like is Kate's right. They not only continue to have really good wine, especially for the price point. This is about $25, $27, but also they're really committed to sustainability. And just for FYI, I know a lot of you have probably joined us for talks in the past where we've talked sustainability and agriculture and wine, but particularly you can look for various things on the label like this California certified organic farming label. So if that matters to you, the Grgich does, you know, they are certified in that. And then Kate, you have a great rosé with a fun story that I think would go really well with.
So what I have is Black Girl Magic Rosé. I think that this is an interesting story. This is by the McBride sisters, who, first of all, this is the largest black owned winery in the United States, or is it even in the world? Possibly
in the world, but yeah, biggest black owned wine company in the U.S. for sure.
Two sisters, one of them lives in New Zealand, one of them lives in California. They didn't know each other for like till they were what, in their 20s, 30s?
Yeah, it was like the mid 2000s that they met.
And realized that they were sisters and they both
So
loved
great.
wine. And so now they collaborate on several different wines. Some are made in New Zealand, some are made in California. This one is Central Coast, so close to me again. But I just really enjoy the it just has a nice body to it that I think really stands up. Well, that's what I love about rosés in general, is that they have, because many of them are made with Pinot. I don't know if this one is. I guess
this is a mix of grapes as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, but they can be great with the richer foods, like awesome with your goat cheese, whipped goat cheese. Or, if they have enough fruit forwardness, which I think this one does, they can kind of cut through some spice, which we're going to share a gorditas recipe that has a habanero salsa in a minute. But I love this rosé with that salsa, even if I'm eating that salsa by itself just as a dip, because it's spicy, but this kind of cleanses the palate and really just is such a beautiful wine to go with either one of those things.
For sure. And we're going to come back to the rosés because, like Kate said, they're very food friendly for most of the dishes that we're going to show you. But I wanted to kind of talk about the Sauvignon Blancs because I think they're also very
well, that's what I was going to say when you were talking about the whipped goat cheese. Is what I would drink with it would be probably a Sauvignon Blanc, because
like all day, every day, right?
Yeah, it has that bright acidity. They have the green apple, kind of like those crisper edged fruits. Yeah. And the one that I have here is this right here. You can see Sidebar. This is the Ramey Sidebar Sauvignon Blanc. This is a Russian River Valley. This one is from Ritchie Vineyard. So this Ritchie Vineyard one, it goes for $37. I know that they have another Sauvignon Blanc that is a little bit lower a price point, excuse me. But I've just loved their Sauvignon Blancs so much, and are so great with, like I said, with like a creamier, full-bodied dip, like the goat cheese dip.
For sure.
A lot of people think that Sauvignon Blancs aren't exactly food friendly, but I don't really agree with that. I think it depends. Like, I wouldn't serve them with like a tomato salsa or something like that. Like, I don't think that's a good pairing. But if you have some, like the beaten pear chips, the sweet potato chips, something that's kind of like a little bit on the sweeter side. Go great with Sauvignon Blanc, in my opinion. But
yeah, I think it's that old, like, what grows together, which I know we did last year. If any of you were watching those Facebook lives, and when you think about it in the old world, what the epicenter for fresh goat cheese, Chèvre, in France is the Loire Valley, and the epicenter for Sauvignon Blanc in France is the Loire Valley. So it's a pairing that's gone together like since the beginning of time, basically, since the beginning of wine time, let's say.
And it makes sense. It makes sense.
And I think what's really cool about the Ramey in particular is their family, their father, David, was kind of like Professor Chardonnay. Like, he really got into like how to bring the most terroir out of it and how to use natural yeast and all these things in that Russian River area that, if you've never been to the Russian River, it's one of those places that has so many microclimates. I really encourage you to go visit it to understand it, because Sonoma and Russian River in particular were like hard for me to wrap my head around in terms of where things came from until I actually visited them. But this wine, again, showing these family-owned, multi-generational wineries that are kind of having a new generation. This wine is actually aged in concrete eggs. So it's going to be extremely clean, right? But it's not that stainless steel cleanliness, it's that concrete. So that is something that I think we all look for when we want clean flavored wines when it comes to something like goat cheese. Because if you had something that was too tannic or too buttery or something, it probably would fight with that. So
yeah, it's that minerality that I think just really is the key.
Totally key. So a couple other ones. The Ramey is about $37, and then a little bit more of a value wine is the Bonterra. This is $14, and this is 88% Sauvignon Blanc with a little bit of Chardonnay and Verdejo in it. And, what I think is really incredible about Bonterra is, you can find this wine all over the place, and they are also certified organic. They're very committed to sustainability, showing that, in fact, that these days, over 80% of California wines are made in a certified sustainable winery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just shows you that. I was just reading an article before this on the San Francisco Chronicle talking about the effects of climate change are really being felt this harvest, this vintage in particular, by winemakers, and seeing that the California winemakers are pushing the envelope on figuring out ways to use less water or to, have just responsible practices is something that I know makes me proud to be buying wine from California.
Well, absolutely, and it makes sense that they're doing it because they have to sustain business. I mean, it's 100%. Just there's no choice now.
100%. So the Bonterra is about 14. The Ramey that Casey, I'm calling you, what Kate was showing.
You call me whatever you want.
That's our other friend. And then we also poured the Mary Edwards 2019 Sauvignon Blanc, also from the Russian River Valley where the Ramey's from. And to me, this is a little bit more expensive at $50. But this is a wine that when people tell me they don't like Sauvignon Blanc and they've been drinking maybe New World wine from a different area that's known for a certain style of Sauvignon Blanc, I like to pour them this because it is kind of a bridge between an Unoaked Chardonnay and a Sauvignon Blanc and has a lot of expression of flavor. And I think is one of these kinds of Sauvignon Blancs that you do feel you could pair with the majority of the recipes that we're sharing today. So speaking of an Unoaked Chardonnay, we have one we can show you in just a hot second. But I wanted to talk about
I want to talk about your dip, about your hummus.
Pumpkin hummus.
Can I talk about your pumpkin hummus, please?
When I said to my husband, we're going to make pumpkin. So Kate and I have been on a bunch of tours with California Grown, met a bunch of farmers across the state. Last year, around this time, we got to meet some of the premier sweet potato farmers in California. And I was all about it because it's like never a bad day for a sweet potato in my world. But I also adore squash. And when I told my husband, I'm going to make a pumpkin hummus that has fried sage and toasted pepitas and a little bit of chili oil. And he was like, I don't want pumpkins in my hummus. Like, stop, go away. So
what's wrong with that boy?
I convinced him that he is now a fan of pumpkin hummus.
Incorrect.
And this is so simple because you take, the shortest shortcut recipe would be to take a can of non-pumpkin filling that's not seasoned, but just pumpkin puree with a can of beans. But if you wanted to, you could follow the recipes on either olajalapeno.com or saltwind.com, where we have other ways of making hummus with dried beans or, zhuzhing them up. And then, of course, I know when I lived in the Bay Area, when Kate and I lived in the Bay Area, I loved getting the sugar pie pumpkins that come out around Halloween into Thanksgiving. And so if you can get your hands on one of those, I would highly recommend roasting that.
And I feel like they every year it seems like they're more easily available.
Seems like
just in every grocery store. So
I agree.
When you see that big bin of pumpkins that's not jack-o'-lanterns, take a second look and see if they're the sugar pie pumpkins, because if they are, grab one and use that to make any of the pumpkin recipes that you're going to make this year instead of canned pumpkins. It is so
much flavor. It's going to add so much flavor. And I think one of the things that when I first tried to get my family to use whole pumpkins, their instinct was I have to jack-o'-lantern it and like cut it or trim it or somehow. And you don't have to. You can stick the whole thing in your oven and roast it until it's like kind of collapsing on itself. And then when it's cool enough to handle, you're just going to split it open, take out the seeds, and then use that flesh right up. And obviously, like, you could use it in a pie. You could use it in a casserole. But here, you're going to blend it together. You're going to really quickly roast some garlic, cloves, and olive oil. And then take the cloves out, put them in the food processor with a little bit of maple syrup and a little bit of pumpkin and the garbanzo beans, just a touch of olive oil. And then you're going to fry sage leaves in the oil and put a dash, which takes just seconds and can be done ahead of time. And then you're going to throw a dash of little chili flakes in there, or a whole chili, whatever you have in your cabinet. and then add just a tablespoon of that to the puree. And all of a sudden you're going to have something that you're like, oh, this is just, I could have bought this wherever. And it has the sweetness of the maple syrup, and it has spice from the chilies, and it has the sage. So it feels like all of the fall flavors kind of like put into this relatively healthy, very, very, very easy to make ahead dip. And I can tell you that my nieces and nephews have been eating it because it's not that far removed from hummus. So they're still feeling like familiar enough flavors. And in terms of pairings, I think all the rosés, all the Sauvignon Blancs, but especially Kate, the Chardonnay that you have.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, I was going to say, just first of all, that I think that hummus is so wine friendly. Like, I know we always talk about wines being food friendly, but that hummus is so wine friendly in that, like, if it's the other way around, like you're asked to bring something to a party and you don't know what kind of wines they'll be serving, this is such a good recipe, because I can't think of a wine that would not go with that.
Yeah. I guess some big like Tannic Nebbiolo or something like that, but you know,
maybe, but that's pretty random that's what people are going to be serving. So, but yes, so that's a great recipe to keep in your back pocket for the holidays if you're asked to bring something to a party. But what I want to talk about next is the Avant Kendall-Jackson
Unoaked Chardonnay.
I know. I was like, is that what it? I'm reading it backwards on the screen. Unoaked Chardonnay. I thought I grabbed the wrong bottle. I'm sorry. Unoaked Chardonnay. So Kendall-Jackson is a very familiar name in California winemaking. You probably are familiar with their other line of Chardonnays that do spend time aging in oak barrels and have a very buttery, oaky flavor that some people absolutely love and some people don't care for. And if you're one of the don't care fors, then you should try this, because this never sees oak. It gets aged in stainless steel. And so the fruit in this really shines through, I think. I think Chardonnay grapes in and of themselves have a richness to them.
Yeah.
So some people associate that with the oak aging process. But I think what's lovely about this wine is that it's not there. So you really do get to taste the buttery fruitness of the Chardonnay grapes in this wine. Would go beautifully with your hummus. And so I definitely take a look and see if you can find the unoaked. And what would be fun is to compare it with an oak Chardonnay.
The estate, with the Kendall-Jackson estate Chardonnay.
Yeah.
In fact, last fall when I first tried the Avant, my sister is really into Burgundy, whites, so Chardonnays, and my father is like probably the person who's bought the most Kendall-Jackson estate Chardonnay on planet
Is he the president of their fan club?
I think so. If you look him up, the Chardonnay in the dictionary, there's Jim Mollenkamp. And so we brought both to our very small 6-person Thanksgiving, our bubble Thanksgiving last year. And it was really fun seeing how the two wines were playing with the flavors in the meal, and people were feeling unexpected things, right? Like, oh, I actually really like the estate here, but I like the Avant there, or both are going fabulously here. But the Avant is definitely something, if you see it on a wine list and you're looking for a less oak style, a Chardonnay, know that that's a great pick for you.
It's very vibrant. It's a very vibrant wine.
It is. Now we have a couple more Chardonnays, but I think they would go equally well with your next recipe.
Okay.
So why don't we talk about that, and then we'll talk about the next Chardonnays and start getting into some reds.
Yeah. Okay. So the next recipe I have are these taquitos. I'm going to move this pico de gallo off the plate so it doesn't fall on my computer. I'm just going to tilt this down so you can see. So these are, if you can see in there, in the little hole, they're filled with poblano peppers and sweet corn and some queso fresco. These that I made today, I baked. But if you want to go to the recipe, I believe there's a link in the event description. And there is instructions in that recipe for frying them like traditionally taquitos would be shallow fried in oil or baked like I did today, or even in your air fryer. So however you want to do it. Super simple recipe, honestly. And I love it because it kind of like is from going from late summer into fall. So this would work as long as you have sweet corn in your market, which tends to last till probably October. You can make this from now until, probably, through the end of October. So it still is a great recipe to have for like if you're hosting like a game night, a game day or something like that. And it's really easy. You just saute the poblanos. You don't char them or anything like that. Just saute them with some scallions in some oil, and then add your sweet corn. You don't want to cook it too long because this, the sweet corn is pretty tender right off the cob if it's fresh. And then let that cool a little bit so it doesn't melt the cheese, and then mix it with some queso fresco and roll it up and bake it or shallow fry it or put them in your air fryer, what have you, and you're ready to go. So I like to serve it with some pico de gallo. I have some fresh pico de gallo here. Also with like a little, if you want it, you can make this like an appetizer with a dip, with a pico de gallo or even some guacamole or something like that. Even like if you want to take a little bit of sour cream and mince up a chipotle chili and mix that in, make like a little chipotle sour cream, that would be a great dip too, just super simple. Or if you want to serve them for dinner, like a more main course, I like to serve it with some shredded lettuce, like I have here with the pico de gallo, maybe some thinly sliced radishes, thinly sliced red onion, just lots of stuff that they like to put on top. And how I like to do is just lay everything out and let people kind of top it the way that they want. And it's really good. Super simple and fresh.
Well, and I love that it's a little indulgent, but it's also plant-based. So you're kind of riding that line between something that's like relatively healthy.
And honestly, like if you bake them, they're not, really that indulgent. There's a little bit of cheese in there, but that's about it.
Yeah. And so, I think this is one of those dishes that's super fun to pair because you have a teeny bit of spice off the poblano, a little bit of that like vegetal green flavor coming off the chili.
Mm-hmm.
You have some sweetness off the corn, and then the queso fresco is going to provide a little saltiness, a little tang. So I think there's a lot of flavors that we could be playing around with. Again, we're just going to keep saying the Sauvignon Blancs we've talked about, the Rosés we've talked about would all go fabulously.
The bubbles would be great too.
The bubbles would be great. But also I think not only the KJ Avant Unoaked Chardonnay, but also a properly oaked classic California style Chardonnay would go wonderfully here, because if you think about like how delicious, two of my favorite preparations are corn on the cob Midwest style with like absolutely nothing but butter and salt. And then, poblanos made Raja style usually made with Mexican sour cream or crema. And those both are this like dairy richness going with those vegetables. And so it's not that far of a stretch to think about the butteriness of a Chardonnay that has had some of that butteriness comes from, malolactic fermentation. So a butteriness coming from the malolactic would actually really be nice here. So
I think
a little bit of that, but they're not like, oak box.
I think though, if you're going to go in that direction, I don't know if I would serve it with the pico de gallo at that point. Because sometimes to me, like the tomatoes and the oaked Chardonnay don't necessarily do that great together. So I would go with maybe serving it with a guacamole or the sour cream dip that we talked about. But other than that, absolutely.
So we have the Frey, which I think this is our second wine from Mendocino. And I always tend to find that when I travel outside of California that wines from Mendocino are a little under the radar. And I think some of the most interesting wines in the state, very good value wines, are coming from Mendocino. And I swear there's some of those wines up there, be it because they're in the middle of redwoods and forests, there is a level of kind of like forest floor, and there's a level of just nature that you can get in some of these wines.
Well, I also think like I always get more like ocean vibes too for some reason, like a little salinity or like rocks, like that kind of that you don't really find in maybe like some of the Napa Chardonnays and stuff.
Definitely. So we have this Frey. This is their Mendocino 2008. And in case you can't tell from the label, it is a biodynamic Chardonnay.
Did you say biodynamic?
So this is certified organic and certified biodynamic. So if those are things that you look out for in wines, this wine is, checking off both of those boxes. It's an $18 bottle of wine. And one of the things I really think is special about Mendocino is that when it comes to sustainability, this wine is, not only certified organic, not only certified biodynamic, but the family is very committed to sustainable practices. And one of the things that's really incredible is because a lot of these vineyards were purchased at a time when they could have a relatively a large amount of land, for the same money that in Napa or Sonoma would give you a fraction of that land. They tend to have like acres upon acres upon acres, and Frey is like that. And actually 90% of the land that is theirs is dedicated to a wildlife habitat. And so what that means is that you are going to see a lot of the natural critters like, deer or bears or foxes or what have you, just like, running around Snow White style through the fields when you're up there. Not necessarily through the grapevines, but in the general area. And, as we're talking about sustainability and everything, this concept of having this biodiversity is so important, not only for nature, but also at the end of the day, so that you can just have a really expressive wine that has a lot to reflect in terms of terroir. And I think this Chardonnay does that. So the Frey Chardonnay Mendocino, and there's just a little bit of vanilla from a little bit of French oak. And there's really nice green apple on this. So you're going to get some refreshing flavor with a little bit of vanilla. So like Kate was saying,
I just feel like, and also like, I know that wine is not effervescent at all, but it feels like very light. It just feels very, a little bit more, I don't know, vibrant than maybe some of the other oak Chardonnays.
Yeah. And then a very classic oak Chardonnay would be the Schug Chardonnay from Carneros. It's 2018. That's $35. This is pretty much almost exclusively an estate Chardonnay. And I think, one of the things that you want to think about with Schug is they're another one of these ones that has an amazing background. So Walter Schug, the patriarch of the wine company, was working at Joseph Phelps, really loved Pinot Noir, wanted to start his own brand so that he could celebrate Pinot Noir, and started Schug. So they're first known for Pinot Noir, but as you can see on the label, this is a Carneros Chardonnay, and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir both grow fabulously in Carneros, which is basically just that big strip of land as soon as you get off the San Francisco Bay. Well, this part of the San Francisco Bay is called the San Pablo Bay, before you get to Napa and Sonoma. And so it has this really magical climate where tons of sun during the daytime, but there's the Petaluma Gap nearby, which is cooling it off and allowing it to have grapes that have a really nice balance of acidity and ripeness. And so also the Domaine Carneros is from that same area and is made with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir really like the Carneros area. And okay, we've talked about whites. We've talked about whites, sparklings, rosés. I think it's time to talk about our last couple recipes and some red wine.
Okay, excellent. Shall I go first?
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of my favorites.
So beautiful.
These are gorditas. Okay, so if you have never had a gordita or don't know what it is, they're basically like little, not little, thicker tortillas that are smaller in size, right? Although you could make them as large as you want. And then you split them open and stuff them with whatever you want. So these are stuffed with roasted mushrooms. I used queso fresco again here, which if you want to make the taquitos and these, then you're using the same cheese, and that's like one less ingredient you have to buy, but you could use a different cheese if you prefer. and some beans. And so I used blue corn masa to make the gorditas. Masa harina, that is. You can buy gorditas already made in like if you have a Latin grocery store that's near you. But I highly suggest at least just trying once to make your own, because the fresh gorditas are tender. They are more moist. And I feel like the ones you buy at the store can kind of tend to be dried out a little bit. So with these gorditas, I just cooked them on a comal, or like a cast. You could even use like a cast iron skillet, dry cast iron skillet, and then cut them open and stuffed them. If you want to go the extra step, what I really love to do after I stuff them is to fry them a little bit in some oil, just because it's like so good, and then it melts the cheese also a tad bit. So if you want to do that, you'd stuff them like they are here, although they're delicious just like this. So if don't want to deter you from just cooking them and stuffing them, they're very good. But if you want to see that like extra little step, put like a slick of oil in the cast iron skillet that you just used to cook them in, and just lightly toast them on both sides with the stuffing, the filling already in there. That is another way also to heat them up. Like if you want to go this far and stuff them in advance, like if you're going to have people over, then all you have to do to warm them up again is just to fry them lightly on both sides and serve them. To serve them, my favorite dip to go with is this tomatillo habanero salsa. It is spicy, like habaneros tend to be, but so good. The tomatillos kind of, that bright acidity kind of chills out the habanero a little bit. If you're spice sensitive, it's probably not the salsa for you, but if you love spicy stuff, this one is awesome. So really love it with these gorditas, because the gorditas are kind of rich. They have the cheese, they have the roasted mushrooms, the masa is kind of, it's filling in and of itself. So that salsa is great for kind of like cutting through that. Plus, if you have some left over, the masa or the salsa goes awesome, like on a bowl of beans with chips, on anything really. It would be good on the taquitos too. So make a batch. I like usually have a batch in my fridge just for whatever. Put on eggs, anything. So it's my new favorite spicy salsa. I'm just gonna say that.
Awesome. So spice, and I think especially the Grgich Hills Rosé would be really nice. And
yeah, I think any of the rosés,
rosé would be really nice.
Or the bubbles again. Bubbles go with everything.
But we do have quite a few reds that would work. Not only, I mean, some of these reds would work with your gorditas and your taquitos, as well as the next recipe I'm going to show. But I think one of the things that to me is classic, one of the most classic pairings is people say, okay, California, we're known for Zinfandel, and Zinfandel and barbecue go together really well. So you'll see a lot of people maybe making Santa Maria tri-tip and serving it with Zinfandel. But I think that same thing that you're getting out of the Zinfandel, going with the barbecue, the char and the spice and all those things, makes it also a really nice complement to something really spicy. And just remember that, depending on the kind of Zinfandel you're talking about, it could have more leathery notes. It could have more like jammy. So making sure you try the Zinfandel before you try with these recipes so that none of it's overwhelming. But Kate, I believe you have the Klein, right?
Yes, I do. Okay. So this is a Contra Costa County, which, if you don't know where that is, it is outside of San Francisco, outside of the Bay Area to the east, like if you're on your way to Sacramento. And this one would be great with the taquitos or the gorditas, or your pumpkin hummus would be really good too.
Sure.
It's bold, but it does have plenty of berry flavors that would be beautiful with the gorditas. It would stand up to the spicy salsa, or if you don't want to do the spicy salsa, still really good with the gorditas. And I just really like this one. You know, I think this is the only Contra Costa wine that
Well,
we're showing today.
yeah. And it's interesting because Klein is known for their wines coming from Sonoma, but this particular Zinfandel comes from ancient vines Zinfandel from Contra Costa. And if I'm not mistaken, the vines are they're decades and decades. I believe they're well over 50 years old. So you're getting all that classic stuff that you might, if you like a Lodi Zinfandel, which is kind of known as our capital Zinfandel in California. This is going to be a teeny bit cooler climate just because it is a teeny bit closer to the ocean. It's not like Sonoma Coast or something, but it's closer than whereas Lodi is completely landlocked. So what I like about this is it's $25. I think it's an extremely good value for the way it drinks. So if you like Zinfandel, if your friend likes Zinfandel and they're one of these people that you're like, I can't afford your Zinfandel, have it. You can get them this Zinfandel and they're going to get that quality that they like out of a classic California Zinfandel without the bill that goes along with it. And then we also have the Rock Pile Zinfandel,
which is so lovely.
And so this is a little bit of a higher price point at $55. And Rockpile AVA is in Sonoma. And so basically, if you're in the town of Healdsburg and you just start driving north, you will hit Rockpile. It's right there. This is 96% Zinfandel with just a little bit of Petite Syrah. And what else did I want to tell you about this? That this is the 2017 of this Rockpile Zinfandel. This Cemetery Vineyard is their prize vineyard at Rockpile for Zinfandel, and they pulled it up and replanted it after 2017. So this is a little bit of a gem because this is the last year that these Zinfandel.
I think if you are a Zinfandel lover, if that is your jam, then you should get yourself a bottle of that wine and maybe hold on to it because it is so good. It would age nicely.
Yeah.
It is a real gem of wine.
Yeah, I think it definitely it's bold, it's big, it has a little bit of astringency. So you're going to want bold, big flavors to go with it. And we're just trying to say that we know Zinfandel in like meat is like a classic pairing. It can also go with meaty, big dishes.
Yeah. I mean, Zinfandel and veggies also go well together. So it's perfect for all the fall produce that's coming into season. Yeah. So we're talking sweet potatoes, we're talking mushrooms, we're talking onions, we're talking beets.
Like braised, slow cooked, roasted. You're concentrating those flavors. They're going to become bigger, especially if you're adding fats to the dish, lots of olive oil, anything like that. Like, go ahead. So I almost feel like you could do one of your fabulous moles because Kate has incredible moles.
Oh yeah, that would be so good.
Oh, do one of her Colorado mole on the sweet potatoes and do this like very rich meat plant-based mole.
Or you could even do like if you would do enmoladas or something like that with the Zinfandel would be very good.
Yes. So the Zinfandels, and then the last dish I want to show you goes well with everything except the Sauvignon Blancs, and it also goes well with the last couple red wines we have. We have just a couple more minutes, so before I go into this, I just want to have us show you, in case you're wondering about the wines, because we've talked about a lot, they are all in the event, so you can find all the links to all the wines, and you will know all of everything, the vintages, everything,
and how to get them, and how to buy them,
all that. And then the recipes, Kate's recipes are linked. The recipes from my website, Salt and Wind, will be going out this Saturday in our newsletter. So go ahead and sign up for that. But just to give you a rundown, let's just start from the beginning, Kate, and quickly show, and then I'll go into the last one. So first off, we had your
the recipes. Oh yeah. I was like, are we talking about wine or recipes? I'm confused. So the beet and pear chips were the first recipe we went over.
And then we had the sweet potato chips on the whipped goat cheese with thyme, honey, and olive oil. And then we talked about the maple roasted garlic pumpkin hummus with fried sage and fried pepitas.
And then we had the poblano and sweet corn taquitos with queso fresco and a little pico de gallo on top.
And then,
then it was me. And then the gorditas, we had the roasted mushroom and again queso fresco and bean gorditas with the habanero salsa,
which I really wish I could have for dinner tonight. And then the final dish is probably the most aggressive in terms of flavor. So this is a crostini, and these are roasted grape agrodolce. So agrodolce means sweet sour in Italian. You'll often find it with cipollini onions is the very classic way to do it. And you will often find it served over meats like pork and steak and what have you. It's incredible with figs, great with mushrooms, but the fastest way, all of those recipes have to be cooked a little, like for a while. This is probably the quickest way to make agrodolce. So if you can get your hands on some delicious flame raisins, any of the red, Thompson, whatever you love in terms of grapes, California grapes while they're in season, get your hands on the red varieties. Because you want their sweetness. You don't want too much of the, tang or sour tartness that can come off the green. So get some red grapes. You're going to saute a shallot, add in a little bit of garlic, in a little bit of olive oil, and then all you do at that point is put a little balsamic, a sprig of rosemary, a little honey, and the halved grapes in a pan. And you cook them until the grapes just start to collapse a little bit. And then when you're done, you pull out the sprig of rosemary and you put in some fresh, which, if you don't like that, I happen to love that combo, but if you don't, you could leave out herbs, you could add in thyme, you could use marjoram, you could use oregano, all kinds of things. And all I've done here is toasted the bread like a crostini and then topped it with a little bit of prosciutto, but you could use salad, you could use any kind of cured meat you like.
Or even maybe shaved Parmesan or something like that if you don't want to do the meat, right?
Yes, of course, if you don't want to do any kind of cured meat, then all kinds of cheeses would go well on this. I think especially something very creamy. So whether that's a brie cheese and you want that kind of flavor going on, then it would go really well with some of these rosés we were talking about. It would also go fabulous with mozzarella or burrata so that you get extreme creaminess to counteract the sweet sour that's going on with the grapes. But you do want to keep in mind with balsamic, that's a bold flavor. And when it gets cooked down, even more so. And so you wouldn't want something like the Sauvignon Blanc or the Oak Chardonnay they're just not going to be friends. Yeah. So we can go back to our sparkling rosé. We can go back to any of the rosés we talked about. And then I would actually move not toward the Zinfandels because I think their pepperiness and the balsamic might actually, it depends on the Zinfandel. Some might work, some might not. But we do have a couple Cabernet Sauvignons that I think would go great. So Kate, you were going to talk Stag's Leap.
I have the Stag's
Leap. You work basically next door to Stag's Leap.
Yes. My husband and I both worked at Frog's Leap for a hot minute. And that's actually also where we got married, which is basically next door to Stag's Leap. And this wine I just love. It's so beautiful. It's the Artemis. Stag's Leap is really known for their cabs, and this one definitely shows you why. That one's a 2018. It's full-bodied, it's luscious, it's everything you love about big California Cabernets. Would go beautifully with Aida's grape agrodolce, even with the balsamic like that. It's so it just has this rounded mouthfeel. It's a beautiful, beautiful wine. Also great if you are a cab lover to pick up a couple bottles. I particularly love that 2018 vintage. I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't been to Stag's Leap, it is definitely a historic vineyard that is worth visiting. I got to go and do a dinner in their wine caves, and it was just one of the most magical experiences I've ever had in California wine country. So we're going to finish it off. We've shown you the recipes. We've shown you all the wines. The last one we're going to finish off with is another stellar Cabernet Sauvignon from Ridge. Ridge Estate is known for their Montebello red from the Santa Cruz Mountains. And that Montebello vineyard is one of the most historic, prized, all the things vineyards in California. And so the grapes that are coming off this Ridge Estate are also coming. The majority of them are coming from that same Montebello vineyard. So that prized vineyard, you get these grapes. And this is $65. So it is a lower price point. I know it's a pricey wine, but it's a lower price point than their Montebello. So you're still getting all the things that, that Ridge is known for. Just really, because it's Santa Cruz Mountain, and it's not Napa, you're getting that a lot of ripeness, but you're also getting fog in the morning. And so if you think, I don't like California cows because you have this stereotype that they're all big and bold and fruit forward, this kind of runs the border between the two. It still has a lot of those characteristics, but because it's grown closer to the coast, you are going to have not quite as much fruit going on as you would in the Stag's Leap. Both of those are definitely, special occasion in terms of their price points. But I think that, if there's anything, granted, we put some cheese and we put some meat in some of these recipes, but they're largely plant-based. And as we know, this is the trend as the fall flavors come forward. Kate and I love celebrating them with lots and lots of plant-forward recipes. And hopefully we showed you a few ways to do that with some very happy hour friendly, mostly make ahead, easy recipes, and lots of ideas for California wine. So if you have any questions for us, you can get to each of us on social media, subscribe to our newsletters. But also we work with California Grown a lot. So we're always producing recipes using California produce. What else are we doing, Kate, with California?
Well, I was going to say, if you had fun today and enjoyed watching us talk about wines and appetizers, you should join our cooking class next month. We are going to be teaching how to make cheese, which is always a good time in my book. So that will be fun. And then we also have a tamales making class in November. So you can find out all that information. Just DM us on Instagram or look in the events, and there we'll share a link to the classes there. But I'm at Hola Jalapeno, and Aida's at
Aida Mollenkamp or at Salt and Wind. So you can find us there. And honestly, if you ever want to just nerd out more about all things seasonal, all things wine, all things California, we're your ladies to do that. So just reach out to us. And
we love being nerds.
We love sharing recipes with local produce. And hopefully we're heading to a holiday season where we can entertain and be with our family and friends more than last year. And hopefully you'll be making some of these recipes. So, enjoy. Kate, anything else?
That's it. Thanks so much for joining us. I had a really good time talking to you, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.